In the shadowy underbelly of the world, where wealth and power intertwine with darkness, Clare Bronfman emerged as a figure both enigmatic and chilling. As the heiress to a vast fortune amassed by her family's ownership of Seagram, Clare was accustomed to a life of privilege and influence. However, beneath her polished exterior lay a complex web of ambition and manipulation that would ultimately lead her down a treacherous path. Clare's journey began in the opulent halls of her family estate, where she was raised amidst luxury and entitlement. From an early age, she was taught that money could buy not only comfort, but also control. This lesson would shape her worldview, driving her to seek out power in unconventional ways. Her fascination with self-improvement and personal development led her to a controversial organization known as NXIVM, a group that promised enlightenment but harbored sinister secrets. As Clare delved deeper into NXIVM, she became captivated by its charismatic leader, Keith Raniere. His charm and intellect masked a darker agenda, one that would ensnare countless individuals into a cult-like existence. Clare's wealth became a tool for Raniere, enabling him to expand his influence and manipulate the vulnerable. With each passing day, Clare found herself more entrenched in this world, blinded by loyalty and ambition. The conflict began to unfold as Clare's devotion to NXIVM transformed into something far more sinister. Under the guise of empowerment, Raniere orchestrated a system of exploitation that preyed on the weak. Women were groomed for servitude, coerced into submission through psychological manipulation and fear. Clare, once an innocent heiress seeking purpose, became an enabler of this dark enterprise. As whispers of wrongdoing began to circulate outside the confines of NXIVM, Clare's world started to unravel. The media caught wind of the allegations surrounding the organization, and investigations were launched. Clare found herself at a crossroads. Loyalty to Raniere clashed with the growing realization that she was part of something profoundly evil. The emotional tone of this story is steeped in tension and moral ambiguity. Clare's internal struggle serves as a reflection of the broader themes of power, manipulation, and the consequences of blind allegiance. The stakes are high as she grapples with her identity. Will she continue to support a man who has led her down this dark path? Or will she find the strength to break free from the chains of her own making? As the story unfolds, it becomes clear that Clare's choices will have far-reaching consequences, not only for herself, but for all those ensnared in Raniere's web. The challenge lies not only in confronting external forces, but also in facing the demons within her own soul. Shadows gather around Clare Bronfman as she stands on the precipice of a decision that could alter the course of her life forever. Will she embrace redemption or plunge deeper into darkness? The answer lies in the heart of this harrowing tale, a journey through betrayal, exploitation, and ultimately the quest for liberation. As Clare Bronfman became more enmeshed in the world of NXIVM, the initial allure of self-discovery and empowerment began to fade, revealing the cult's darker undercurrents. The organization, cloaked in the language of personal growth, was a facade for a more insidious agenda. Clare's role evolved from a devoted follower to a key player, wielding her wealth to fund Raniere's ambitions and protect the organization from scrutiny. Clare's life was meticulously orchestrated, filled with high-stakes meetings and clandestine gatherings where Raniere held court. The air was thick with an intoxicating mix of charisma and manipulation. Followers were drawn in, believing they were part of a revolutionary movement. Clare's influence grew as she became one of Raniere's most trusted confidants, often tasked with recruiting new members and silencing dissent. The conflict escalated as Clare began to witness the toll NXIVM's practices took on its members. Women who entered the organization seeking empowerment found themselves trapped in a cycle of emotional and psychological abuse. Clare observed firsthand how Raniere employed tactics of fear and coercion to maintain control over his followers. The women were subjected to degrading rituals, forced to reveal their deepest secrets as collateral against their loyalty. Clare, initially blinded by her devotion, started to feel the weight of her complicity in these acts. Internal strife began to surface within NXIVM as some members grew disillusioned with Raniere's methods. Whispers of betrayal echoed through the halls, and Clare found herself at the center of a brewing storm. Those who questioned Raniere's authority were quickly silenced or ostracized, creating an atmosphere of paranoia that permeated the group. Clare struggled with her loyalty to Raniere and her growing unease about the organization's practices. Amidst this turmoil, Clare's relationship with other prominent members began to fracture. As she became more entrenched in her role, she alienated friends and allies who dared to voice concerns about NXIVM's ethical boundaries. The tension reached a boiling point when several former members came forward with allegations of abuse and exploitation. Media coverage intensified, painting NXIVM as a dangerous cult rather than the self-help organization it claimed to be. Clare found herself torn between defending Raniere and grappling with the moral implications of her involvement. The conflict within her deepened as she faced mounting pressure from both outside forces and her own conscience. She attended meetings where Raniere dismissed accusations as fabrications designed to undermine his vision. Yet in private moments, Clare couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was profoundly wrong. As investigations into NXIVM gained momentum, Clare's desperation grew. She poured resources into legal defenses and public relations campaigns aimed at discrediting accusers. Her once innocent quest for purpose morphed into a frantic battle for survival, a fight not only for her reputation, but for her very identity. In this tumultuous environment, Clare's relationships became increasingly strained. Those closest to her began to question her judgment and motives. Friends turned to adversaries as they sought to distance themselves from the impending scandal. Clare felt isolated in her commitment to Raniere, struggling to reconcile her loyalty with the growing evidence of wrongdoing. The emotional stakes reached new heights when Clare received an anonymous tip warning her that authorities were closing in on NXIVM. Fear gripped her heart. She realized that the walls were closing in on them all. The once glamorous life she had known was crumbling around her as the reality of their situation set in. As Clare grappled with these revelations, she found herself at a crossroads. Would she continue down this path of denial and complicity, or confront the truth that lay before her? The conflict had transformed from external battles against critics into an internal struggle for redemption, a quest for clarity amidst chaos. The stage was set for a dramatic turning point as Clare stood on the precipice of change. Would she find the courage to break free from Raniere's grasp and seek redemption for herself and those ensnared by his manipulative web? Or would she remain shackled by fear and loyalty, plunging deeper into darkness? With tensions mounting and consequences looming large, Clare Bronfman faced an uncertain future, one that would test not only her resolve but also the very fabric of her identity. As the storm of conflict brewed around Clare Bronfman, the relationships she had cultivated within NXIVM began to unravel, revealing the complexities of loyalty, betrayal, and moral ambiguity. The once harmonious environment that had welcomed her into the fold now felt suffocating, filled with whispers of dissent and fear. Clare's interactions with key figures in NXIVM became a battleground for her internal struggle, forcing her to confront the consequences of her choices. One of Clare's closest allies was Sarah Edmondson, a charismatic and ambitious member who had initially inspired Clare with her passion for personal development. Together, they had forged a bond, over their shared experiences within NXIVM, but as the organization's darker practices came to light, their paths diverged. Sarah's growing disillusionment with Raniere's methods clashed with Clare's unwavering loyalty. The tension between them escalated during a pivotal meeting where Sarah voiced her concerns about the treatment of women within NXIVM. "Clare, we can't ignore what's happening here," Sarah implored, her voice trembling with urgency. "This isn't empowerment, it's exploitation." Clare felt a pang of guilt, but quickly dismissed Sarah's fears. "You don't understand the bigger picture. We're part of something revolutionary. Raniere is changing lives." The rift between them deepened as Sarah chose to leave NXIVM, courageously stepping into the light to expose the truth. Clare watched helplessly as their friendship disintegrated, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. The betrayal stung. It was a reminder that loyalty came at a cost, and she was now on the opposite side of someone she once considered a sister. In contrast, Clare's relationship with Keith Raniere grew increasingly complex. Initially captivated by his intellect and vision, Clare had placed him on a pedestal, viewing him as a mentor and savior. However, as the allegations against him mounted and the organization faced scrutiny, Clare found herself defending him against mounting evidence of wrongdoing. Raniere manipulated her emotions with his charm, often dismissing concerns as mere distractions from their mission. "Clare," he would say in hushed tones, "you must trust me. We are on the brink of something extraordinary. Don't let them sway you." Yet behind closed doors, Clare struggled with her conscience. She witnessed firsthand how Raniere wielded his power over vulnerable women, how he preyed on their insecurities and used their trust against them. In moments of quiet reflection, she would replay conversations in her mind, questioning whether she was complicit in something horrific. Another significant relationship in Clare's life was with her sister, Clare Bronfman. Unlike Clare, Sarah had always maintained a degree of skepticism about NXIVM's practices. Their differing perspectives created tension between them. While Clare was deeply entrenched in the organization's ideals, Sarah remained wary of its methods. As news of investigations broke, Sarah reached out to Clare in desperation. "Clare, please. You need to see this for what it is," Sarah pleaded during one heated phone call. "This isn't just about you anymore. It's about innocent people being hurt." Clare felt torn between her loyalty to Raniere and her sister's genuine concern for her well-being. The love they once shared became tainted by distrust and fear. Clare resented Sarah for trying to pull her away from what she believed was a noble cause. As Clare navigated these tumultuous relationships, she also encountered other members who had begun to question Raniere's authority. Some were former allies who had turned into adversaries as they sought to expose the truth behind NXIVM's facade. Their presence served as constant reminders of what could happen if she strayed too far from Raniere's teachings. One evening at an exclusive gathering meant to celebrate NXIVM's achievements, tensions boiled over when one member publicly confronted Raniere about his treatment of women within the organization. The atmosphere crackled with intensity as accusations flew back and forth. "Keith," the woman declared boldly, "you can't silence us anymore. We deserve to be heard." Clare felt a rush of panic as she watched Raniere respond with his trademark calmness, his eyes glinting with a mixture of anger and amusement. He dismissed the woman's concerns with chilling ease, while Clare looked on in horror at how easily he manipulated those around him. In these moments of confrontation and vulnerability, Clare began to realize that the relationships she held dear were becoming increasingly toxic. The very foundation of trust that had once united them was crumbling under the weight of deceit and manipulation. As external pressures mounted and investigations intensified, Clare grappled with feelings of isolation and desperation. She longed for connection, but found herself surrounded by individuals whose motivations were now clouded by fear or ambition. The friendships that had once provided solace now felt like chains binding her to an uncertain fate. Amidst this turmoil, Claire faced an existential crisis. Who was she without NXIVM? As she reflected on her relationships and choices, she began to question whether true empowerment could exist in an environment built on manipulation and control. The emotional stakes rose as Claire stood at a crossroads. Would she cling to Raniere and his twisted vision, or seek redemption through honesty and accountability? The relationships that defined her existence were now fraught with tension. Each interaction served as a reminder that loyalty came at a steep price. With each passing day, Clare Bronfman found herself grappling not only with external forces, but also with an internal battle for clarity amidst chaos, a quest for understanding in a world where trust had become a dangerous game. The turning point in Clare Bronfman's tumultuous journey arrived with a suddenness that shattered the fragile illusion she had clung to for so long. It was a day like any other, filled with meetings and discussions about the future of NXIVM, yet an undercurrent of tension rippled through the organization. The media had intensified its scrutiny, and whispers of impending legal action loomed like storm clouds over their heads. Claire sat in a lavishly decorated conference room, surrounded by other high-ranking members of NXIVM. The atmosphere was thick with anxiety as they awaited Keith Raniere's arrival. He entered the room with his characteristic air of confidence, but there was something different about him today. A flicker of uncertainty danced in his eyes, betraying the facade he usually maintained. "Ladies and gentlemen," Raniere began, his voice smooth yet strained, "we are facing unprecedented challenges. The outside world is attempting to undermine our mission, but we must remain steadfast. We are on the brink of something extraordinary." As he spoke, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that their world was crumbling beneath them. The weight of recent allegations pressed heavily on her conscience, and she felt a growing sense of dread as she recalled Sarah Edmondson's warnings and her sister Sarah's pleas for clarity. Just as Raniere concluded his speech, an unexpected interruption shattered the tense atmosphere. A group of investigative journalists burst into the room, cameras flashing and questions flying. The air was electric with chaos as Claire watched in disbelief. This was not just a media inquiry, it was an invasion, an exposure of everything they had tried to conceal. "Clare Bronfman, can you comment on the allegations regarding NXIVM's treatment of women?" One journalist shouted, thrusting a microphone toward her. Claire's heart raced as she felt the weight of their scrutiny. She glanced at Raniere, searching for guidance, but he remained silent, his expression unreadable. In that moment, Claire realized she was standing at a precipice. Her loyalty to Raniere was being tested in ways she had never anticipated. With each question posed by the reporters, Claire felt her carefully constructed world begin to unravel. They pressed her about. The allegations of sex trafficking and abuse within NXIVM, demanding answers she struggled to provide. The truth hung heavily in the air, threatening to consume her. Is it true that women were coerced into providing compromising material as collateral? Another journalist pressed. Claire's mind raced as she grappled with the implications of their inquiries. She had witnessed the manipulation firsthand, the way Raniere exploited trust and vulnerability for his gain. Yet here she was, caught between defending him and acknowledging the reality that lay before her. As the barrage of questions continued, Claire felt an overwhelming wave of emotion wash over her. Fear, guilt, and confusion collided within her heart. It became painfully clear that she could no longer remain silent or complicit in this web of deceit. The turning point had arrived. It was time to confront the truth she had been avoiding. In a moment of clarity amidst the chaos, Claire stepped forward and addressed the journalists directly. I cannot speak for everyone involved in NXIVM, she began hesitantly, but I believe we need to have an open conversation about what has transpired here. The room fell silent as her words hung in the air like a fragile thread connecting her past to an uncertain future. Claire's admission marked a pivotal shift. It was a step toward accountability that would reverberate throughout NXIVM and beyond. Raniere's expression darkened as he realized that Claire's moment of honesty could jeopardize everything he had built. He leaned closer to her, whispering urgently, "You need to be careful. They will twist your words." But Claire felt something shift within her, a burgeoning sense of agency that had long been stifled by Raniere's influence. She could no longer be a pawn in his game. It was time to reclaim her narrative. As news of Claire's comments spread like wildfire through social media and news outlets, the fallout was immediate and devastating. Former members began sharing their stories publicly. Women who had suffered under NXIVM's oppressive regime found their voices amplified by Claire's unexpected candor. The tide began to turn against Raniere and his organization as more individuals came forward with allegations of abuse. In this whirlwind of revelations, Claire faced immense backlash from loyalists within NXIVM who viewed her actions as betrayal. Friends turned into foes overnight as they rallied around Raniere, desperate to protect their leader at all costs. Claire felt isolated once more, a pariah among those who had once embraced her as one of their own. Yet amidst this turmoil emerged a glimmer of hope, a chance for redemption not only for herself, but for all those who had been ensnared by Raniere's manipulative grasp. Claire found solace in connecting with former members who shared their experiences and sought justice together. As investigations into NXIVM intensified and law enforcement began to take action against Raniere and his inner circle, Claire realized that this was just the beginning of a long journey toward healing and accountability. The turning point had ignited a fire within her, a determination to confront not only Raniere, but also her own complicity in perpetuating harm. With each passing day, Clare Bronfman stood resolute in her commitment to uncovering the truth. A truth that would challenge everything she once believed about loyalty, power, and redemption. The turning point in Clare Bronfman's tumultuous journey arrived with a suddenness that shattered the fragile illusion she had clung to for so long. It was a day like any other, filled with meetings and discussions about the future of NXIVM. Yet an undercurrent of tension rippled through the organization. The media had intensified its scrutiny, and whispers of impending legal action loomed like storm clouds over their heads. Claire sat in a lavishly decorated conference room, surrounded by other high-ranking members of NXIVM. The atmosphere was thick with anxiety as they awaited Keith Raniere's arrival. He entered the room with his characteristic air of confidence. But there was something different about him today. A flicker of uncertainty danced in his eyes, betraying the facade he usually maintained. "Ladies and gentlemen," Raniere began, his voice smooth yet strained, "we are facing unprecedented challenges. The outside world is attempting to undermine our mission, but we must remain steadfast. We are on the brink of something extraordinary." As he spoke, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that their world was crumbling beneath them. The weight of recent allegations pressed heavily on her conscience, and she felt a growing sense of dread as she recalled Sarah Edmondson's warnings and her sister Sarah's pleas for clarity. Just as Raniere concluded his speech, an unexpected interruption shattered the tense atmosphere. A group of investigative journalists burst into the room, cameras flashing and questions flying. The air was electric with chaos as Claire watched in disbelief. This was not just a media inquiry, it was an invasion, an exposure of everything they had tried to conceal. "Clare Bronfman, can you comment on the allegations regarding NXIVM's treatment of women?" one journalist shouted, thrusting a microphone toward her. Claire's heart raced as she felt the weight of their scrutiny. She glanced at Raniere, searching for guidance, but he remained silent, his expression unreadable. In that moment, Claire realized she was standing at a precipice. Her loyalty to Raniere was being tested in ways she had never anticipated. With each question posed by the reporters, Claire felt her carefully constructed world begin to unravel. They pressed her about, the allegations of sex trafficking and abuse within NXIVM, demanding answers she struggled to provide. The truth hung heavily in the air, threatening to consume her. Is it true that women were coerced into providing compromising material as collateral? Another journalist pressed. Claire's mind raced as she grappled with the implications of their inquiries. She had witnessed the manipulation firsthand, the way Raniere exploited trust and vulnerability for his gain. Yet here she was, caught between defending him and acknowledging the reality that lay before her. As the barrage of questions continued, Claire felt an overwhelming wave of emotion wash over her. Fear, guilt, and confusion collided within her heart. It became painfully clear that she could no longer remain silent or complicit in this web of deceit. The turning point had arrived. It was time to confront the truth she had been avoiding. In a moment of clarity amidst the chaos, Claire stepped forward and addressed the journalists directly. "I cannot speak for everyone involved in NXIVM," she began hesitantly, "but I believe we need to have an open conversation about what has transpired here." The room fell silent as her words hung in the air like a fragile thread connecting her past to an uncertain future. Claire's admission marked a pivotal shift. It was a step toward accountability that would reverberate throughout NXIVM and beyond. Raniere's expression darkened as he realized that Claire's moment of honesty could jeopardize everything he had built. He leaned closer to her, whispering urgently, "You need to be careful. They will twist your words." But Claire felt something shift within her, a burgeoning sense of agency that had long been stifled by Raniere's influence. She could no longer be a pawn in his game. It was time to reclaim her narrative. As news of Claire's comments spread like wildfire through social media and news outlets, the fallout was immediate and devastating. Former members began sharing their stories publicly. Women who had suffered under NXIVM's oppressive regime found their voices amplified by Claire's unexpected candor. The tide began to turn against Raniere and his organization as more individuals came forward with allegations of abuse. In this whirlwind of revelations, Claire faced immense backlash from loyalists within NXIVM who viewed her actions as betrayal. Friends turned into foes overnight as they rallied around Raniere, desperate to protect their leader at all costs. Claire felt isolated once more, a pariah among those who had once embraced her as one of their own. Yet amidst this turmoil emerged a glimmer of hope, a chance for redemption, not only for herself, but for all those who had been ensnared by Raniere's manipulative grasp. Claire found solace in connecting with former members who shared their experiences and sought justice together. As investigations into NXIVM intensified and law enforcement began to take action against Raniere and his inner circle, Claire realized that this was just the beginning of a long journey toward healing and accountability. The turning point had ignited a fire within her, a determination to confront not only Raniere, but also her own complicity in perpetuating harm. With each passing day, Clare Bronfman stood resolute in her commitment to uncovering the truth, a truth that would challenge everything she once believed about loyalty, power, and redemption. The climax of Clare Bronfman's harrowing journey unfolded amidst a crescendo of tension and anticipation as the legal ramifications of NXIVM's actions came to a head. With investigations intensifying and public scrutiny reaching a fever pitch, Claire found herself at the center of a maelstrom that would ultimately determine her fate and the fate of many others. As the trial against Keith Raniere approached, the atmosphere was charged with anxiety. Clare, now an outspoken advocate for survivors, had become a key witness in the case against Raniere and his inner circle. The courtroom was packed with journalists, supporters, and former members of NXIVM, all eager to witness the unfolding drama. Clare's heart raced as she entered the courtroom, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The prosecution presented a compelling case, detailing the systematic abuse and manipulation that had permeated NXIVM. Testimonies from former members painted a vivid picture of exploitation, stories of coercion, emotional abuse, and sexual trafficking that sent shockwaves through the audience. Each account resonated deeply with Clare, reminding her of her own complicity in perpetuating Raniere's reign. As she took the stand, Clare felt an overwhelming mix of fear and determination. This was her moment to confront not only Raniere, but also her own past. She looked out at the sea of faces, some filled with empathy, others with judgment, and took a deep breath. "Clare Bronfman," the prosecutor began, "can you describe your involvement with NXIVM and your relationship with Keith Raniere?" Clare's voice trembled as she recounted her journey, from an eager follower seeking purpose to a key player in a manipulative organization. She spoke candidly about her initial admiration for Raniere and how that admiration had morphed into complicity in acts she now recognized as heinous. "I thought I was part of something transformative," she stated, her voice steadying. "But I was blind to the reality, the harm we were causing to vulnerable individuals who sought help." The courtroom fell silent as Clare's words hung in the air. She could feel Raniere's piercing gaze upon her, a mixture of anger and disbelief etched across his face. In that moment, she realized that this was not just about her testimony, it was about reclaiming her narrative and standing up for those who had suffered in silence. As the trial progressed, Clare faced intense cross-examination from Raniere's defense team. They sought to undermine her credibility, painting her as a willing participant rather than a victim of manipulation. Each question felt like an assault on her character. They probed into her motivations and decisions within NXIVM. "Isn't it true that you benefited financially from NXIVM?" one attorney pressed. "You were complicit in these actions for your own gain." Clare's heart raced as she grappled with their accusations, yet instead of succumbing to their tactics, she found strength in vulnerability. "I was blinded by loyalty," she asserted defiantly. "But I recognize now that my wealth does not absolve me from responsibility for my actions." The tension in the courtroom reached its peak as Clare continued to testify about the inner workings of NXIVM. The coercive tactics employed by Raniere and his inner circle to manipulate followers into submission. Her words resonated deeply with those present. They served as both an indictment of Raniere's actions and a testament to Clare's journey toward redemption. As the trial neared its conclusion, Clare faced one final moment that would define her path forward. The prosecution called forth several survivors to share their stories. Women who had endured unimaginable suffering at the hands of Raniere and his followers. Their testimonies were raw and powerful. Each account added layers to the narrative Clare had begun to unravel. When it was finally time for Clare to address Raniere directly, she felt an electric charge in the air, a culmination of all her fears and hopes converging into this singular moment. She turned to face him, their eyes locking in a battle of wills. "Keith," she began, her voice steady despite the whirlwind inside her, "you manipulated us all under the guise of empowerment while exploiting our vulnerabilities for your gain. You preyed on our trust and turned it into something monstrous." Raniere's expression hardened as he attempted to project confidence despite his precarious position. "You're lying!" he retorted sharply. "You were always aware of what we were doing." Claire took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage within her. "I may have been complicit once," she replied firmly, "but I refuse to be silent any longer. I stand here today not just for myself, but for every woman who has suffered because of you." In that moment, something shifted, not just within Claire, but within everyone present in that courtroom. The truth reverberated through the air like a clarion call. It transcended individual narratives and became part of a larger movement toward justice. As closing arguments were made and deliberations began, Claire felt a sense of catharsis wash over her, a realization that she had reclaimed her power through vulnerability and honesty. Regardless of what verdict awaited them, she knew she had taken significant steps toward healing, not only for herself, but also for those who had been silenced. The climax reached its zenith as jurors returned with their verdicts, guilty on multiple counts against Raniere and several key associates within NXIVM. The courtroom erupted into applause from supporters who had fought tirelessly for justice. In that moment, Clare Bronfman understood that while this chapter may have closed, it marked only the beginning of a new journey, one defined by resilience, accountability, and unwavering commitment to truth. In the wake of the trial's verdict, Clare Bronfman found herself standing at a new turning point, one that would redefine her identity and purpose in profound ways. The courtroom had erupted with emotions, relief, anger, and hope, as the guilty verdict against Keith Raniere reverberated through the air. Yet for Claire, the victory was bittersweet. While justice had been served, the shadows of her past loomed large, challenging her to confront the consequences of her actions and the lives affected by her complicity. As news of Raniere's conviction spread across media outlets, Claire became a focal point of discussion. Some hailed her as a whistleblower who had bravely stepped forward to expose the truth, while others viewed her as a symbol of privilege and betrayal. The duality of public perception weighed heavily on her shoulders. She was no longer just an heiress, but a complex figure, entwined in a narrative of both victimhood and accountability. In the months following the trial, Claire sought to channel her tumultuous emotions into meaningful action. She began attending support groups for survivors of cults and abusive organizations, immersing herself in their stories and struggles. Each encounter deepened her understanding of the psychological manipulation that had ensnared so many, including herself. Claire listened intently as individuals shared their experiences of trauma, resilience, and healing. Their journeys inspired her to confront her own narrative with honesty. Determined to make amends for her past, Claire began working with advocacy organizations focused on educating the public about the dangers of coercive control and manipulation. She participated in workshops aimed at empowering individuals to recognize red flags within relationships and organizations. Through these initiatives, Claire found a renewed sense of purpose, a chance to use her experience as a cautionary tale while advocating for those still trapped in cycles of abuse. However, as she immersed herself in this work, Claire faced an unexpected challenge, reconciling her past with her present. The guilt she felt for having enabled Raniere's actions weighed heavily on her conscience. She often found herself haunted by memories of women who had suffered under NXIVM's oppressive regime, women whose lives had been irrevocably altered by their experiences. One evening, after a particularly emotional support group session, Claire sat alone in her apartment, grappling with feelings of inadequacy. She felt an overwhelming urge to reach out to those she had harmed during her time with NXIVM, a desire to offer apologies and seek forgiveness from those who had suffered because of her actions. With trembling hands, Claire penned heartfelt letters to several former members expressing remorse for her role in perpetuating harm within the organization. She acknowledged their pain and validated their experiences while taking full responsibility for her past choices. It was an act of vulnerability that required immense courage. She understood that not everyone would be ready to forgive or accept her overtures. As she sent out those letters into the world, a sense of liberation washed over Clare. For the first time in years, she felt as though she was reclaiming ownership over her narrative, not just as an heiress entangled in darkness, but as a woman committed to growth and healing. The responses she received varied widely. Some individuals expressed gratitude for her honesty, while others remained guarded or even hostile. Yet each reply served as a reminder that healing is not linear. It is fraught with complexities and requires time. During this period of reflection and outreach, Clare also began exploring opportunities for personal growth beyond advocacy work. She enrolled in courses focused on psychology and trauma recovery, seeking knowledge that would enable her to better understand both herself and those she aimed to help. This academic pursuit became a source of empowerment. It allowed Clare to transform her pain into purpose, while equipping herself with tools to support others on their journeys toward healing. Amidst this transformative process, Clare encountered a pivotal moment when she was invited to speak at a national conference dedicated to survivor empowerment. The invitation filled her with both excitement and trepidation. It represented an opportunity to share her story on a larger platform, but also brought forth fears of judgment and scrutiny. As she prepared for the event, Clare reflected on how far she had come since those dark days within NXIVM. She envisioned standing before an audience not as a figure shrouded in shame, but as someone who had faced adversity head-on, someone willing to embrace vulnerability in order to foster understanding. On the day of the conference, Clare took the stage amid applause from attendees eager to hear her story. As she stood before them, nervous yet resolute, she spoke candidly about her journey from privilege to complicity and ultimately toward accountability. "I once believed I was part of something transformative," she began, "but I was blind to the reality, the harm we were causing to vulnerable individuals who sought help." Her words resonated deeply within the audience. Survivors nodded in solidarity while advocates listened intently. Clare's vulnerability became a bridge connecting their shared experiences, a reminder that healing is possible even amidst darkness. As she concluded her speech with a message of hope, encouraging others to reclaim their narratives, Clare felt an overwhelming sense of purpose wash over her. This was not just about seeking forgiveness. It was about fostering understanding and empowering others to break free from cycles of manipulation. In that moment, Clare Bronfman understood that while she could not change the past, she could shape a future defined by resilience and compassion, a future where accountability coexists with redemption. As Clare Bronfman stepped off the stage, after her powerful speech, she felt a profound sense of closure beginning to envelop her. The applause from the audience echoed in her ears, but it was not the accolades that filled her with warmth. It was the realization that she had transformed her pain into a source of strength. In sharing her story, she had not only reclaimed her narrative, but also offered hope to others who had suffered in silence. In the months that followed the conference, Clare continued her work as an advocate for survivors of abuse and manipulation. She became a prominent voice in discussions surrounding cults and coercive control, using her platform to educate others about the psychological tactics employed by manipulative leaders. Clare's journey was no longer just about seeking redemption for herself. It was about empowering others to recognize their worth and reclaim their lives. Through her advocacy efforts, Clare connected with various organizations dedicated to supporting survivors. She collaborated on initiatives aimed at raising awareness about the signs of manipulation and providing resources for those seeking help. Each interaction reinforced her belief that healing is a collective journey, one that thrives on connection, understanding, and shared experiences. As Claire navigated this new chapter of her life, she also took time for personal reflection and growth. She continued her studies in psychology, delving deeper into the intricacies of trauma recovery. This academic pursuit not only enriched her understanding, but also allowed her to approach advocacy work with empathy and compassion. Claire's relationships evolved as well. She reached out to former NXIVM members, seeking to mend the bonds that had frayed during their tumultuous experiences. Some were receptive, willing to engage in conversations about healing and forgiveness, while others remained hesitant. Regardless of their responses, Claire approached each interaction with humility and openness, understanding that rebuilding trust takes time. One particularly poignant moment came when Claire reconnected with Sarah Edmondson, her former ally who had left NXIVM before Claire found the courage to speak out. Their conversation was filled with vulnerability as they shared their respective journeys since leaving the organization. Sarah expressed gratitude for Claire's willingness to confront her past, while Claire acknowledged the pain she had caused by remaining silent for so long. "I'm sorry for how I treated you," Claire said earnestly, tears brimming in her eyes. "I didn't understand then what was happening around us." Sarah smiled softly, recognizing the growth in Claire's demeanor. "We all have our paths to walk. What matters is that we're here now." This moment of reconciliation marked a significant turning point in Claire's life, a reminder that healing is not just about individual journeys, but also about rebuilding connections with those who share similar experiences. As time passed, Claire began to find peace within herself, a sense of acceptance regarding her past choices and their consequences. She understood that while she could not erase the harm caused by NXIVM or her role within it, she could choose how to move forward. With each passing day, she embraced a future defined by purpose and compassion. The final chapter of Claire's story was not one of absolution, but rather one of resilience, a testament to the power of transformation through adversity. She became an advocate not only for survivors, but also for those still trapped in cycles of manipulation and abuse. Her voice served as a beacon of hope for individuals seeking clarity amidst confusion, a reminder that healing is possible even in the darkest circumstances. In reflecting on her journey, Clare Bronfman recognized that true empowerment lies not in wealth or status, but in embracing vulnerability and standing up for what is right. Her story became a tapestry woven with threads of pain, growth, and ultimately redemption, a narrative that would inspire countless others to reclaim their lives from the shadows. As she continued down this path of advocacy and self-discovery, Claire understood that while the road ahead may be fraught with challenges, it was also filled with opportunities for connection, understanding, and healing. With each step forward, she reaffirmed her commitment to fostering awareness about coercive control while championing the voices of survivors everywhere. Clare Bronfman emerged from the darkness not just as an heiress entangled in a cult, but as a woman transformed, one who had faced her demons head-on and emerged stronger on the other side. Years after the tumultuous events that had shaped Clare Bronfman's life, she stood on a sunlit stage at a national conference dedicated to survivor empowerment and education. The audience was filled with individuals from all walks of life. Survivors, advocates, and allies, each person eager to hear stories of resilience and hope. Claire felt a sense of belonging wash over her, a feeling that had eluded her for so long during her time in NXIVM. As she prepared to speak, Claire reflected on the transformative journey she had undertaken since those dark days. The memories of her past still lingered, but they no longer held power over her. Instead, they served as reminders of the strength she had discovered within herself, the strength to confront her mistakes and work tirelessly toward healing. Today, I stand before you not just as someone who once fell prey to manipulation, but as a testament to the power of redemption," Claire began, her voice steady and resonant. "I have learned that true empowerment comes from acknowledging our pasts, embracing vulnerability, and using our experiences to uplift others." The audience listened intently as Claire shared her story, her initial entanglement with NXIVM, the painful realizations that followed, and her commitment to advocacy and education. She spoke candidly about the importance of recognizing the signs of coercion and manipulation in relationships, emphasizing that knowledge is a powerful tool for prevention. As she concluded her speech, Claire felt a surge of emotion, a deep connection with those in attendance who had faced similar struggles. "We are not defined by our pasts. We are defined by how we choose to rise from them," she said passionately. "Together, we can create a world where everyone feels empowered to speak their truth and reclaim their lives." The applause that followed was thunderous, a collective acknowledgement of the journey they had all undertaken together. In that moment, Claire understood that healing is not a solitary path. It is woven through shared experiences and connections with others. In the years that followed, Claire continued to advocate for survivors while also pursuing her studies in psychology. She became involved in various initiatives aimed at educating communities about the dangers of cults and coercive control. Her work extended beyond speaking engagements. She collaborated with mental health professionals to develop resources for survivors seeking support. Claire also established a scholarship fund for individuals who wished to pursue education in psychology or social work, an initiative aimed at empowering future advocates who could help others navigate their healing journeys. Through these efforts, Claire found purpose in giving back to the community that had embraced her during her darkest moments. She forged lasting friendships with fellow advocates and survivors who shared her commitment to creating positive change. As time passed, Claire's story became one of hope, a narrative that resonated with countless individuals seeking solace in their own journeys toward healing. She was invited to participate in documentaries and podcasts focused on survivor experiences, using these platforms to amplify the voices of those still silenced by fear. In quiet moments of reflection, Claire often thought about the women whose lives had been affected by NXIVM's manipulative practices. She carried their stories with her, a reminder of why she fought so passionately for change. While she could not undo the past, she could honor their experiences by advocating for awareness and prevention. Years later, as Claire stood on that stage, surrounded by a supportive community, she realized how far she had come. The journey toward healing is ongoing. It requires constant reflection and growth. Yet through it all, Claire had discovered an unshakable truth. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is strength, the strength to confront one's past while striving for a brighter future. As she looked out at the audience filled with hopeful faces, Claire felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the path she had traveled. A journey marked by pain, but also by resilience and transformation. With each story shared and each life touched, she knew they were collectively building a future where healing is possible, a future where every individual feels empowered to reclaim their narrative. In this new chapter of her life, Clare Bronfman emerged not just as an advocate, but as a beacon of hope, an embodiment of the belief that even in darkness, light can be found through connection, understanding, and unwavering determination. And so, as she stepped off the stage amid applause and cheers from those whose lives she had touched, Claire embraced the journey ahead, one filled with possibilities for growth, healing, and continued advocacy for those still seeking their voices in a world that often tries to silence them. With every step forward, Clare Bronfman reaffirmed her commitment to fostering awareness about coercive control while championing the voices of survivors everywhere, a legacy built on resilience and compassion that would inspire generations to come. This was not just an ending, it was a new beginning, a testament to the enduring power of redemption and the unbreakable spirit of those who dare to rise from adversity.